He thought he was inviting a stranger from the streets to a simple office party. But what she revealed under the chandeliers would shake an empire to its core. The city throbbed with its usual end-of-day rhythm, a river of suits and high heels rushing between glass towers that caught the last rays of the sun. David Anderson moved with them, briefcase in hand, his mind already drifting toward the solitude of his apartment and the reheated leftovers waiting in his fridge. Another day at Thorn Industries, another stack of proposals filed, another round of meetings that left him both exhausted and unsatisfied. For all the glossy promises of corporate life, his reality felt like an endless loop, numbers, charts, small talk, and the hollow ache of knowing he was capable of more. As he turned down a quieter side street, the pace of his thoughts slowed with the thinning crowd. That was when he saw her. At first, she seemed like part of the urban landscape, a solitary figure seated against the cold stone of a building, legs drawn up, a small cardboard sign resting across her knees. The words were simple, written in careful block letters. Fallen on hard times, any help appreciated. Her clothes were mismatched and worn, yet she held herself with an odd grace that made her stand out even more. David's steps faltered. He should have kept walking, everyone else did. But something in the angle of her shoulders, in the quiet dignity of her posture, held him there. Her eyes, when she looked up, weren't the glazed, weary eyes he'd seen so often on these streets. They were sharp, reflective, carrying a weight of knowledge and sorrow that made him catch his breath. "Are you all right?" he asked before he could stop himself, his voice softer than he intended. The woman studied him, her expression unreadable. "As all right as one can be," she replied evenly. Her voice startled him, not raspy or broken, but clear, measured, articulate. David shifted, suddenly self-conscious, aware of the gulf between his tailored office attire and her threadbare jacket. "I'm David," he said, awkwardly extending a hand. She hesitated, then accepted, her grip firm, her gaze steady. "Lisa," she answered simply. The name hung between them. David searched for words, clumsy in his own curiosity. "If you don't mind me asking, how did you end up here?" For the first time, her eyes clouded, and he regretted the question. But she answered, her tone low, deliberate. "Life has a way of taking everything from you, piece by piece." She gave a faint, rueful smile that cut deeper than any detailed confession. The phrase lodged itself in David's chest like a shard of glass. Piece by piece, he couldn't shake it. He saw not just a woman fallen on hard times, but someone carrying a story, one he couldn't turn away from. "You don't need to explain," he said gently, though the question still burned inside him. "But is there anything I can do?" Lisa's lips curved into something that was almost amusement. "You're kind to ask. I'm not looking for handouts, just a chance to stand again." The sincerity in her tone caught him off guard. He should have nodded politely and gone on his way. Instead, the words tumbled out before he could second-guess himself. "Actually, there might be something." She raised an eyebrow, wary, intrigued. "There's a gala next week," he said quickly, stumbling over the explanation. "Thorn Industries hosts it every year. Employees bring a guest and I don't have one. It's formal, there's food, maybe even a chance to meet people. Networking." He winced as the last word left his mouth, realizing how ridiculous it sounded. "I mean, if you'd want to come." The silence stretched. Then Lisa spoke, her tone cool but tinged with something else he couldn't place. "You're inviting a homeless woman you just met to your corporate party?" David flushed. "I know it sounds insane, but you seem like you'd fit right in. And maybe it would be a night away from this, just one night." She studied him for a long moment, eyes searching his face as though measuring his intentions. Finally, she spoke. "If I agree, there's one condition." "Name it." "I won't be your charity case," she said firmly. "If I accept, it will be as your guest. No pity, no rescue." David nodded, relief flooding him. "Deal." Something flickered in her expression. Doubt, perhaps, or the faintest spark of hope. She extended her hand again, and when he took it, David felt the strange certainty that he had just stepped across an invisible line, one that would lead him somewhere he couldn't yet imagine. The evening traffic roared on around them, but for a moment, the world seemed to narrow to just the two of them. The weary woman with secrets in her eyes, and the man who couldn't walk away. Neither knew it yet, but that single act of invitation would ripple outward, reshaping both their lives forever. The following evening, the city was drenched in golden light as David found himself walking beside Lisa again. He couldn't quite explain why he was so invested, why her presence, just a day old in his life, carried such weight. It wasn't pity, it wasn't charity, it was something else. A pull, subtle yet undeniable, as if she carried within her a secret that demanded to be uncovered. They arrived at a small boutique tucked away on the quieter end of the block, its painted sign swinging gently in the evening breeze. Second Chances. The name struck David immediately, and when Lisa saw it, her mouth quirked into a smile. "Seems fitting, doesn't it?" she murmured. Inside, the shop smelled faintly of lavender and old wood, racks of carefully arranged dresses lining the walls. The shopkeeper, a woman in her 50s with warm eyes, glanced at them curiously, but wasted no time. "What can I help you find tonight?" David cleared his throat. "We're looking for something suitable for a gala. Elegant, but understated." The woman's gaze slid toward Lisa, and for a fraction of a second her expression flickered. Surprise, maybe even recognition. But she quickly masked it with a polite smile and led them toward a rack near the back. Lisa ran her fingers over the fabrics, pausing at silks and velvets, her hands lingering as though remembering something. "You've worn clothes like these before," David said quietly, watching her with growing curiosity. Lisa glanced at him, her eyes shadowed. "Once," she replied, "in another life." The answer only deepened his fascination. She pulled out a black sheath dress, simple but undeniably refined, and disappeared into the changing room. David tried to distract himself by scrolling through his phone, but when she stepped back out, his breath stalled. The dress fit her perfectly, sculpting elegance where rags had hidden it. Her hair, though unstyled, fell around her shoulders in a way that seemed almost deliberate, and the tired slump he had seen in her posture before was gone. She stood tall, commanding, as though the fabric had resurrected the woman she once was. "Well?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with nerves. "You look incredible," David said honestly. "Like you've always belonged in a room full of chandeliers." A small laugh escaped her, light but tinged with something bittersweet. "It's been a long time since I've worn anything like this." David found himself unable to stop watching her, his mind turning. Who was she really? The way she spoke, the way she carried herself. This was no ordinary woman who had simply fallen through the cracks. Something in her presence suggested polish, education, maybe even wealth once upon a time. Later, over dinner in a quiet Italian bistro, Lisa's layers peeled back further, though never completely. Between bites of pasta, David told her about his job, about the frustrations of being another cog in Thorn Industries' massive wheel. He confessed the dreams he rarely admitted aloud, to do more, to push for sustainability, to create programs that mattered. Lisa leaned forward, her eyes bright as though she were not just listening but evaluating. "You feel stuck," she said softly, "but you shouldn't. Sometimes doors open in the strangest places. The real question is whether you're ready to walk through them." The way she said it, with such certainty, sent a chill down his spine. "You speak like someone who knows," David pressed. "You've worked in business before, haven't you?" Her fork stilled. For a moment, shadows passed across her face. Then she offered a half-smile, deflecting. "You pick things up if you pay attention. The world teaches you, if you're willing to learn." The mystery only grew heavier between them. As they walked back out to the night, the city lights blazing around them, David knew one thing with absolute clarity. Lisa was not who she appeared to be. She was hiding a story, perhaps an empire of secrets, behind those watchful eyes. And whatever it was, he was now bound to it. When she turned to him beneath the glow of a street lamp, her voice was calm but resolute. "I'll go with you to this gala, David. But remember my condition. I won't be your project. If I step into that ballroom, it will be as your equal." David nodded, his pulse quickening. "Then it's a deal." But as they shook hands once more, he couldn't shake the thought echoing in his mind. What kind of past could shape a woman who looks like royalty in rags, who speaks like she's carried the weight of an empire, yet sits on a street corner with a cardboard sign? The answer, he suspected, was coming, and it would change everything. The night of the Thorn Industries gala arrived, cloaked in anticipation. David adjusted his tie nervously in the mirrored glass of the Celestial Hotel's entrance doors. The hotel, with its towering chandeliers spilling golden light onto polished marble, looked like something out of a dream, a place where the powerful gathered to reaffirm their dominance over the city. For David, this event was always a blur of handshakes and polite smiles, a chance to blend into the background, but tonight would be different. Tonight, he was walking in with her. Lisa stepped out of the car beside him, transformed yet again. The black sheath dress hugged her frame with understated elegance, and her hair, styled into a simple updo, gleamed under the lamps. Gone was the weary woman clutching cardboard. In her place was someone who looked like she belonged in the center of that glittering ballroom. The sight made David's chest tighten with something he couldn't quite name. "You're staring," she said lightly, her lips curving into a small smile. "Sorry," David muttered, heat rising to his face. "It's just, you look like you've done this before." Her gaze flicked toward the entrance where couples swept in through the revolving doors. "Maybe I have," she murmured, almost too softly to hear. Inside, the ballroom was a storm of sound, clinking glasses, polite laughter, the murmur of ambition disguised as conversation. The chandeliers cast pools of gold onto sequined gowns and sleek tuxedos. Waiters glided like shadows, balancing trays of champagne flutes. It was the kingdom of Thorn Industries in full splendor, and as David and Lisa entered, a ripple moved through the crowd. Heads turned. Whispers followed. "Who's that with David from marketing? She doesn't look like a date. She looks like, I don't even know. She carries herself like..." David felt the weight of eyes pressing in from every direction. He glanced at Lisa, worried she might falter under the scrutiny, but to his shock, she was utterly unshaken. She smiled easily, her posture flawless, as though she had been born into this very room. If anything, she looked home. A cluster of David's colleagues approached first. Sarah from accounts, Tom from product development, and Michael from HR. Sarah's eye practically sparkled with curiosity. "David," she said, her tone a mix of delight and suspicion, "you've been holding out on us. Who's your stunning date?" Lisa extended her hand before David could answer. "Lisa," she said warmly, her voice carrying just enough authority to disarm. "It's a pleasure." Tom raised an eyebrow. "And how exactly did you two meet?" The question dangled, baited with expectation. David opened his mouth, fumbling for words, but Lisa stepped in with the calm of someone who'd faced tougher interrogations. "On the street," she said plainly. "David found me when I had nowhere else to go, and in an act of extraordinary kindness, he invited me here." Silence crashed into the group. Sarah blinked, her lips parting. Michael let out a low whistle. Tom looked unconvinced, his expression flickering with disbelief. "On the street?" Sarah echoed slowly. "Forgive me, but you look like you just stepped out of a fashion magazine." Lisa's smile didn't falter. "Appearances can change with a little help. What doesn't change is the way people treat you when they think you're beneath them." David chose differently. Her words landed like a subtle rebuke, silencing them. Even Sarah, usually sharp-tongued, seemed lost for a reply. Michael raised his glass. "Well, here's to that," he said, clinking his champagne. "David, you've got guts." As they moved deeper into the crowd, David could hear more whispers, feel more curious stares. He wanted to protect Lisa from it all, but she seemed to thrive under the attention. She floated from conversation to conversation, engaging with executives, managers, interns alike. Her laughter was genuine, her insights startling. At one point, during a discussion with the head of research, Lisa made an offhand comment about sustainable market trends. The man nearly choked on his drink. "You've got a sharper eye than most of my analysts," he said in astonishment. "Have you worked in the field before?" Lisa only smiled, her answer evasive. "One picks things up if you listen long enough." David's curiosity burned hotter with every exchange. She wasn't improvising, wasn't bluffing, her knowledge was real and it ran deep, but how could someone like her have ended up on the street? As the evening stretched on, the tension in the room shifted. Conversations grew quieter, glances darted toward the entrance. A murmur swept through the crowd. Was he coming? Had anyone seen him yet? Lisa seemed to sense it too. Her hand tightened lightly on David's arm. "What's happening?" she asked. "Our CEO," David explained. "Robert Thompson. He always makes an appearance. The company's his empire, after all." Lisa's face flickered. Fear, recognition, longing. David couldn't tell. She quickly masked it, but his pulse quickened. Something was wrong. Then it happened. The heavy doors swung open. The room hushed as Robert Thompson entered. Tall, silver-haired, eyes as sharp as ice, he commanded silence with nothing more than his presence. He moved through the crowd with the certainty of a man who had built an empire brick by brick. David felt Lisa's grip tighten, her breath hitch audibly. "What is it?" he whispered. But Lisa didn't answer. Her gaze was locked on the CEO, her body rigid as though ever. And Muskel recognized him. Robert scanned the room casually at first, acknowledging nods and greetings. Then his eyes landed on them, on her. And in that instant, the mask of control cracked. His steps faltered, his face drained of color, then surged with emotion. He froze, staring as though he'd seen a ghost. The music stumbled to a halt, a violin bow screeching across strings. Conversations died mid-sentence. The crowd, sensing something extraordinary, turned as one. Robert Thompson's voice, usually booming with authority, came out trembling, almost broken. "Elizabeth?" David's heart lurched. His gaze snapped to Lisa, who stood pale and trembling, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. The ballroom, frozen in collective breath, waited for her reply. The ballroom seemed to collapse in on itself. Chandeliers still glowed, champagne glasses still sparkled under the lights, but all of it faded into silence, into the sharp weight of one trembling name. "Elizabeth?" The word had cracked out of Robert Thompson like glass under pressure, startlingly fragile from a man known for his iron composure. Gasps spread like a current through the gathered crowd, and all eyes turned toward the woman at David's side. Lisa, Elizabeth, stood motionless, her face ashen, her eyes shimmering with something too complicated to define. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then slowly, as though compelled by something stronger than her will, she stepped forward. Her lips parted, but the sound barely carried above a whisper. "Hello, Robert." It was like the ceiling itself had shifted. The room exhaled in disbelief, the hum of frantic whispers rising again, ricocheting against marble walls. David's stomach flipped. Every nerve screamed for him to make sense of what was happening, but sense was impossible. His date, the woman he had met on a street corner, whom he had helped into this very room, was now staring down the CEO of Thorn Industries, who looked at her as if she were both a ghost and a miracle. Robert moved toward her, his long strides faltering with every step, as though each carried the weight of years of loss. His eyes, steel blue, always intimidating, now shone with raw, vulnerable longing. When he reached her, he lifted a trembling hand, touching her cheek with reverence, as though afraid she would vanish if he blinked. "My God," he breathed. "It's really you." Elizabeth, no longer Lisa, not really, closed her eyes against the contact, tears slipping free. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry for leaving." The murmurs spiked again. "His wife? Did he say wife?" Someone gasped, audibly. Others leaned close, whispering furiously. David's pulse thundered in his ears. Wife? His brain refused to catch up. The woman he'd thought lost to hardship, whom he'd given a chance out of compassion, wasn't a stranger at all. She belonged to this empire already. She belonged to the man who stood before her, the very center of Thorn Industries. Robert suddenly pulled Elizabeth into his arms, holding her with such intensity that the entire ballroom seemed to stop watching and start feeling. The man who had intimidated boardrooms, crushed competition, and built a global empire now clung desperately to the woman who had once disappeared without a trace. His voice cracked as he spoke loud enough for those nearest to hear. "I thought I'd lost you forever." Elizabeth clutched him back, her hands shaky, flung against his back. "I thought I'd lost myself," she replied, her voice breaking. "But I found something out there, something I needed to understand before I could come back." The room was stunned into reverent silence. David stood rooted, his throat dry, his mind a maelstrom. Just hours ago, he had believed he was rescuing a broken stranger. Now he realized she was the missing half of the very man who paid his salary, the most powerful figure in the company. Robert released her, though his arm remained firmly around her waist, protective, almost possessive. He turned, addressing the bewildered guests. His voice, though heavy with emotion, regained its commanding timbre. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "forgive this disruption. Allow me to reintroduce the woman beside me, my wife, Elizabeth Thompson." A collective gasp rolled across the ballroom. "She's been gone a long time," Robert continued, his throat tightening on the words. "But tonight, she has returned. That is all that matters." David swayed, the weight of reality pressing hard. His colleagues were staring at him now, their eyes wide with speculation. Sarah from accounts leaned close to someone and hissed, "That's the woman David brought. He said she was homeless." A wave of suspicion cut through the admiration. Whispers grew sharper. Had David known? Was it a stunt? Did he think he could climb the ladder by bringing back the CEO's wife? Elizabeth's gaze found him then, breaking through his spiral. Her eyes held gratitude, sorrow, and something else. An acknowledgement that he had been the bridge between her two worlds. "David," Robert said suddenly, his gaze shifting. The CEO's steel eyes bore into him, but not with anger. With something far stranger, respect. "You found her." The room rippled with confusion. David opened his mouth, but no words came. I didn't know who she was, he managed at last. I swear, I didn't. Robert gave a small nod, his jaw tight. And yet, you stopped. You cared. When the rest of the city passed her by, you extended a hand. The attention of the room shifted again, curiosity sharpening into something almost reverent. David's pulse hammered louder. He hadn't come to this party to be a hero. He had come to survive, maybe impress his colleagues. Instead, he had stumbled into the center of a drama that would change everything. Elizabeth touched Robert's arm. Not here, she murmured. They deserve answers, but not tonight. Tonight is for reunion, not explanations. Robert searched her face, then inclined his head. Tomorrow, he agreed softly. He turned back to the stunned crowd. Please, he commanded, enjoy the evening. Elizabeth and I will speak when the time is right. For now, let us have this moment. And with that, he led her from the ballroom, their exit as magnetic as their arrival. The crowd buzzed in their wake, theories and judgments colliding in the charged air. David remained frozen, his glass untouched in his hand, his mind reeling. He had thought his act of kindness was small, almost invisible in the world. But now, it was written into the story of Thorn Industries itself. And somehow, he knew, this was only the beginning. The morning after the gala broke bright and deceptively calm, as if the universe itself hadn't just torn open the night before. Yet inside David there was no calm, only a whirlpool of questions, shame, awe, and a gnawing sense that his world had shifted forever. The newspapers were already screaming headlines. Thorn CEO reunited with long-lost wife at company gala. Elizabeth Thompson returns after mysterious disappearance. The stranger who brought her back. The last one featured his photo. Him, glass in hand, standing bewildered beside Elizabeth. He nearly dropped his coffee mug. When his phone rang, the screen glowed with a name that made his pulse spike. Executive Office. Mr. Anderson, the voice of Robert Thompson's assistant said crisply, the CEO and Mrs. Thompson would like to see you immediately. Top floor. David barely remembered the elevator ride up. Each floor ticked past with the weight of doom. By the time the doors slid open, his palms were slick, his chest tight. The office was vast, a kingdom in glass and steel. Robert stood behind a desk of dark mahogany, his posture as rigid as a general's, but the sharp edge of his authority was softened by the woman seated on the leather sofa, Elizabeth, her elegance restored, dressed in a tailored suit. Yet the haunted light in her eyes remained, as if no couture could erase 3 years of wandering shadows. David, Robert said, gesturing for him to sit. Thank you for coming. We have much to discuss. David sank into the chair opposite, feeling the weight of 2 gazes. I want to start by saying I didn't know who she was, he blurted. When I met her on the street, Robert raised a hand. I believe you. Last night made one thing clear. Your actions came not from ambition, but compassion. And that is why you're here now, because you deserve the truth. Elizabeth leaned forward, her eyes locking onto David's. You gave me something no one else did, David. You saw me, and because of that, you deserve to understand why I vanished. The air thickened, heavy with unsaid things. She drew in a slow breath as if summoning courage from some hidden place. 3 years ago, she began, her voice trembling but steadying as she spoke. I was drowning. Everyone saw the glamorous wife of a powerful CEO. But inside, I was empty. Our life was a fortress, wealth, parties, power. But I couldn't hear myself anymore. I didn't know who I was outside of Robert, outside of Thorn. She glanced at her husband, her voice softening. I loved him, but I felt invisible, even to myself. Robert's jaw tightened, his eyes dark. You should have told me, he said quietly. I tried, Elizabeth whispered, pain flaring in her voice. But you were building an empire, Robert. Every time I reached out, I saw the weight you carried and thought, I can't add mine to it. So one night, I left. No note, no plan, except to disappear. David swallowed hard, the surrealness pressing in on him. You chose the streets? Yes, Elizabeth said, meeting his gaze. I stripped away everything, money, name, safety. I needed to understand life without walls, to know what it meant to depend on nothing but humanity itself. And David, humanity wasn't always kind. I saw ugliness, hunger, cruelty. But then, her voice cracked and she steadied it with effort. Then I met people who reminded me what mattered. And when I was at my lowest. Weeks later, as Thorn Lifeline gained momentum, a bombshell hit. A major business magazine published an exposé, The Disappearance of Elizabeth Thompson, What Really Happened. The article hinted at financial impropriety, claiming Elizabeth had withdrawn large sums before vanishing. It suggested she hadn't been lost, but hiding. The whispers roared into accusations overnight. Reporters swarmed again. Mrs. Thompson, did you embezzle company funds? Was your disappearance staged? Mr. Anderson, did you know you were aiding a fugitive? Robert's fury was volcanic. Lies, he thundered, slamming his fist onto his desk. They twist facts to sell headlines. But David saw the flicker in Elizabeth's eyes, the haunted look of someone cornered by shadows from her past. That night, she asked David to meet her alone in the Lifeline Center. She paced the empty hall, her voice taut. I didn't steal, David, but I did take money, my own inheritance, not Thorn's. I needed it to survive, but they'll twist it. They'll drag me through the mud, and worse, they'll drag you with me. David's chest tightened. Then tell the truth, all of it. End the speculation. Her eyes shimmered. The truth isn't tidy. It will hurt Robert. It will hurt this company, and maybe it will hurt you. In that moment, David realized the true weight of what he had stepped into. His act of kindness had not only reunited a powerful couple, it had ignited a battle for legacy, reputation, and truth itself. And the next move would determine whether Thorn Lifeline soared into history or collapsed under scandal. At the next board meeting, the room was packed, tension heavy as chains. Executives muttered, eyes darting between David, Elizabeth, and Robert. The chair of finance spoke coldly. This Lifeline initiative is already draining profits. And now with this scandal, we cannot risk our company's future on compassion experiments. All eyes turned to David. It was his moment. The unlikeliest man in the room now holding the future in his words. His chest rose and he remembered the night he'd stopped. The cardboard sign, the quiet dignity in a woman's eyes when the world ignored her. Thorn was built on ambition, he said, voice ringing. But if ambition is all we have, then we're nothing more than numbers. Elizabeth's story, her disappearance, her return, proves one thing. People break, people fall. And if we, with all our wealth and power, don't reach for them, then this company has no soul worth saving. The room stilled. Even the skeptics shifted uncomfortably. Robert stood, his voice thunderous. David is right. Thorn Lifeline is not a liability. It is our future, and I will stake this company's name on it. Elizabeth's hand found David's under the table, her whisper fierce. Whatever storms come, you've given us a reason to stand. Don't doubt what you've done. The vote passed. Thorn Lifeline lived. But as David left that room, he knew this was only the beginning. The world was watching. Rivals would try to sabotage. Secrets from Elizabeth's missing years still lurked like landmines. And somewhere deep inside him, a spark of both fear and exhilaration told him the greatest battles and the greatest revelations were still ahead. One act of kindness had started a revolution. And revolutions, David realized, never end quietly.